Welcome to the Weekly Lead. I'm Pastor Becky Tirabassi, and every week I want to encourage you to be a leader in your sphere of influence. Will you join me for this week's message? I'm coming in hot. I am going to give you the best of R.A. Torrey today, an author, a revivalist. He is an historian of revival, and from his simple book, How to Pray, I'm going to give you some of the best quotes I've read about praying for revival, being a part of revival, what revival is. So grab your pen and pencil or piece of paper and a cup of coffee and get ready, because you're going to want to write down some of these quotes. Again, R.A. Torrey, his book, How to Pray. Great title, right? R.A. Torrey said this: God is getting ready to work, and now he is listening for the voice of prayer. Will he hear it from you? That's what I love about books from the 19th century and earlier. They're very, very bold. They ask questions that they want answers to. These authors have seen everything, done everything, heard everything, and they know what laziness is. They know what sleepiness is. They know a church that needs to be awakened. And if they were writing now, they'd probably say, yeah, the church in the 21st century needs to be awakened. He said, why is constant, persistent, sleepless, overcoming prayer necessary? Great, simple answer he gives it: because there is a devil who plots against you. Now you can say, oh, that's a little much, but Ephesians 6:12 through 18 says the very same thing when Paul is speaking to the church in Ephesus. R.A. Torrey, having seen revival during D.L. Moody's time, it was a big revival in the United States. It was after the Second Great Awakening, but it traveled through, especially in the Midwest. He said prayer is God's appointed way for obtaining things. So he goes on to say neglect of prayer is the reason for our lack. I like to say, are you a BLT Christian? Too busy, too lazy, or too tired to pray? Well, R.A. Torrey, always referring to biblical leaders, also referred to Jesus. Why did the apostles pray? Because Jesus considered prayer the most important business, the most important weapon of his life. We know that. He always went away to pray, and I'll talk about this in upcoming podcasts. Jesus went away to pray before great things happened, after great things happened, before and during trials. We have to begin to see prayer as our greatest source of power with God and men. In fact, Andrew Murray, one of my favorite quotes, is the devil's greatest tool is to keep the believer from praying. Think about your day. Think about your week. Do you start out saying, I am going to spend 1 hour a day with God every day this week, and then 30 minutes in, something happens, or you happen to pick up, some device that starts to give you news or texts or information, or asks you to do something from someone you really do want to respond to. In other words, you have to get up very, 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 very early if you're going to overcome the desire to get distracted. E.M. Bounds said, much prayer, much power. Little prayer, little power. Now, I don't know if you believe that. I do. E.M. Bounds finished his quote by saying, no prayer, no power. When I think about when I made a decision to pray for 1 hour a day. I was only 29 years old. I was at a convention. I thought everybody who prayed was kind of serious or older or given a really big spiritual task. But the truth is, every Christian who determines to spend time with God will be used by God in ways beyond their own imagination, their own ability, their own capacity, because prayer changes the atmosphere, changes your circumstances, it changes your favorability with others. In fact, I love this quote by R.A. Torrey, and again, the book I'm quoting from is How to Pray. It's very small and very old. My copy is just yellowed and falling apart. He said, when a strong man or woman of action does not accomplish a thing the first time or the second time or the 100th time, he or she, the strong man that is, or the strong woman, keeps hammering away until it is accomplished, until he or she obtains what is sought. You have to dig into these old prayer books. Otherwise, you'll you'll treat prayer like your sphere of influence, your generation does, as something that is not important, is not powerful, doesn't change lives, can't press into the impossible. But prayer is the method by which God gave Jesus himself as a way to teach the disciples how to move mountains, how to talk directly to God. This strong man, this when should you pray? Pray in the morning. God chose the early morning hour for prayer. Jesus did. Now, that means your mind is fresh, you're ready, free from distraction, but it means you have to set the alarm earlier than when you normally need to get up. It's making an appointment with the King, and the people who keep it are powerful. R.A. Torrey said more can be accomplished in prayer in the first hours of the day than any other time during the day. The first thing, and he's one of many authors on prayer who said this very same thing, so write this down. The first thing we do each day should be to get alone with God. You can then face your duties and your temptations in the service of the day and receive strength from God for all. Nights of prayer. Have you ever prayed all night? Here's a great quote by R.A. Torrey. Nights of prayer to God are followed by days of power with men. If you've never been a part of an all-night, 24-hour prayer meeting, you should go or attend the next one. And if there's not one coming up, you should have one in your own church with your own organization. You should set the time, invite the people, prepare a room, and determine to pray for 24 hours for the needs of your city, your state, your nation, your church, and especially for the young generation. You know, I made that, it wasn't a joke, but it's a phrase, are you a BLT Christian? R.A. Torrey, over 100 years ago, was obviously not using the phrase BLT, but there's a little subtitle in his book called Never Too Busy. He says this, some men are so busy that they find no time for prayer. Apparently, the busier Christ's life was, the more he prayed. Is it any wonder that man lost power? The great work he was doing was curtailed in a very marked degree. Never forget that the more work that presses into us, the more time we must spend in prayer. You know, rarely do I challenge you to set aside 1 hour a day with God, but I've done this now over 38 years. I'll start my 39th year of praying 1 hour a day in February of 1984. That's when I started. So it'll be almost 40 years. And I just want to encourage you that if you're stuck, if you're frustrated, if you're not seeing the power of God in your life, don't wait another day. Set your alarm 1 hour earlier. And just, let's say for 7 days, spend 1 hour a day with God, talking to him and listening to him. I use a pattern, my partner prayer notebook. I've taught it all over the United States. There's even an app at the App Store called My Partner Prayer Notebook for Apple devices, where you can use the pattern of talking to God and listening to God that takes about 1 hour a day, where you talk to God in praise, admit, request, and thank you sections, and then listen to God by reading the Bible daily, Old Testament, New Testament, Psalm, and a proverb. What might God do if you were to spend 1 hour a day with him for the next week, the next 7 days, and then try the next month and for 1 year? What might God do? I know what God will do. He will break through for you. As you press in, he will break through. Let me close with this. R.A. Torrey says, you can pray in the morning, you can pray all night, you can pray in the evening. I like to say, you can pray for 1 hour a day for the rest of your life. I'd love for you to take the challenge at the end of this podcast if you've never done that. But R.A. Torrey says, you must pray at all times. 1 Thessalonians 5:17 says, pray without ceasing, and in everything give thanks. In Ephesians 6:18, pray at all times, said Paul. Our whole life should be a conversation with God, and that comes over time. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time. That 1 hour turns into stepping out the front door after spending that hour with God and whispering a prayer, asking for a divine appointment or intervention. I had so many of those today as I was walking in Washington, D.C. People I walked up to, opened my heart to, they to me. I always encourage prayer. Please begin to see yourself as one who walks with God and talks with God and steps out your front door in order to be an encouragement, a prayer warrior for others in your sphere of influence. And would you make an appointment with the King every day, and then invite your sphere of influence to pray with you once a week. Amen? Amen. I hope you've been encouraged by this message, and I hope you join me weekly for the Weekly Lead Podcast. Meanwhile, follow me daily on Instagram. The link is in the bio with everything you need to become a weekly